All right, my next guest is Serpil Şenelmiş. I nearly got it properly. Has worked within the media for over 20 years, and in this time she has presented live TV and radio from local and international locations, produced several high-rating programs, and worked closely with media legends such as Darren Hinch, John Fain and Waleed Ali, among others. Today she runs a content marketing agency called Written and Recorded. Welcome, Serpil.
Thank you, Trevor. You passed the test.
Why do you like podcasting?
Oh, I love podcasting because it fulfills my audio passion. I started working with audio from when I was 14 years old. I used to co-host a program with my dad on a on a bilingual radio station in Perth. So that's where I learnt to fall in love with audio, and so podcasting is just an extension of that.
So when that first came out, you would have been, when, you know, the strands of podcasting, you know, got bigger and bigger, you'd be rapt to see that now the power is in anyone's hands to become a podcaster, to run their own radio show.
Absolutely. They call it the democratization of the media, right? It means that anyone can have a platform, and it's great because often you hear the same voices over and over again in traditional media, and so podcasting has allowed us to diversify the voices that we hear and hear from people that you wouldn't ordinarily get an opportunity to hear from, which means that we can also look at subjects that are quite niche, that are quite specialised, rather than sort of trying to be all things to all people.
Yeah, that's right. What are some of the things they should be looking at? Because strategy is very important. I mean, it's easy to get hung up on the tools and the tech, but really, why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you going to do it? What are the sorts of things you look at from a strategic point of view?
I tend to focus on the 6 journalistic pillars, which is the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And always start with the why. Why are you doing a podcast? What's your purpose? What's your end goal? What are you trying to achieve? If that is to, say, generate more leads, if it's to drive more sales, is it to nurture your existing relationships with your existing customers? Are you trying to stamp yourself as a thought leader in the market? So you need to be able to answer those questions first before then you move on to the what. The what would be looking at things like, what's my competitors doing? Are they doing anything in this space? And if they are, how successful are they at it? If they're not so good at it, how can I capitalize on that? If there's no competitors, how can I carve out a niche for myself in this area? Because podcasts, as I said, work in that sort of niche space, and you can capitalize on that. And then you would move on to the who. Now that's really important. Often people forget about that because they turn it into a giant sales pitch, a bit of a, you know, talking about the company and why my product or my service is good. If you don't put the audience at the heart of the podcast, that podcast is going to fail. So you need to look at things like, who's my audience and who am I specifically speaking to? What are some of the behaviours I know about them, and how can I shape the content to suit those behaviours? If they're time poor, for instance, perhaps the podcast has to be shorter. What else do you know about the audience? Do they react to humour? So perhaps the podcast has to have a humorous element. It's about really knowing your audience well, and this is not a new thought. Radio stations do this all the time, right? So like, for instance, if you're on a youth radio network, you're not going to do a story about how to grow your investment portfolio, correct? Because that's not going to resonate with the audience. The same thinking has to be put into a podcast. So audience at the heart of everything that you do. So
Serpil, you opened up the door about, you know, interviewing. What are the types of formats that you prefer around podcasting, you know, for your clients and stuff? Because there is a number of different ones. There's not a heap, but the one-to-one interview like we're doing now, or the panel, or the toughest one is probably just riffing straight into the microphone. Where do you sit on that?
So I would say, please gear away from riffing straight into the microphone, because that basically is something that doesn't have preparation, is a stream of consciousness, and really needs structure. People are time poor, and you're asking them to invest time in you. So you need to put in the time and effort to create structure. My favorite podcast style is the narrative style one, where you're hearing multiple voices. multiple interviews, there's narration in between, there's music, there's sound effects. It's a bit of a documentary style.
Yeah.
But I also love those one-on-one chats like we're doing at the moment, where you deep dive into a topic and you can really unpick it and draw out really good stories of that particular topic that you're talking about as well. So that can work really well if you've done your prep, if you've got the guest that's really engaging and knows their stuff. It doesn't have to be the bells and whistles narrative style to get that level of engagement. The one that I told you about, the Anthropocene, it is just him talking. He doesn't interview anyone, but he's structured it in a way where it's almost like a short story that you're listening to. So he paints pictures with words, and that's what's really important.
That's the key. So you love podcasting, I love podcasting. We both sort of got businesses around it, but where do you see it happening? Because we see the stats growing. It's not hockey stick growth, which I like. I think it's steady. As people discover podcasting, they tend to listen to a lot of podcasts. But where do you see it, the medium heading from where you sit?
I think there's a lot of opportunity now and coming up for podcasts because of the push towards voice assistants. So people are adopting things like Alexa and Google Home, all those sorts of things more. There is a push towards voice technology, which means that more and more we're going to be relying on the voice. And it's I think there's an opportunity for brands there to bring it into their marketing mix, and so it works cohesively with whatever marketing campaign they're rolling out at the moment. So it does sit hand in hand with their video or their blogs or their articles. It doesn't have to be sort of siloed off. And it lends itself to multi-purposing really well. For instance, when you've created a podcast series, you can easily create a blog or an article out of that particular episode.
That's true, repurposing. Serpil, it's been terrific. I love talking podcasts. Thank you for coming into the Ticker Studio this morning and talking to us about it.
Thank you for having me.